Hey, Mikey, I have a joke for you that kinda, sorta, in a sideways sort of way fits in with our episode today. You ready?
I am.
Excellent. Well, before I roll into the joke, I need to establish some context here. This joke is about Calvinism, which, for those of you not familiar with the term, and no, it has nothing to do with Calvin and Hobbes.
Or my cat, Calvin.
Oh, there you go. It's a Protestant denomination that follows the teachings of John Calvin. The Calvinists have a strong belief that all humans are born into sin, and they're big believers in predestination, which plays into today's episode.
Yes, it does.
Okay, with all that said, and by the way, I'll bet I'm the world's first podcaster to crack wise about Calvinism. Anywho, a Calvinist dies and goes to heaven. He sees two doors. One is labeled free will, and the other is labeled predestination. He walks through the predestination door, and an angel blocks him and asks him why he was there. The Calvinist replies, "I saw this door and decided to walk through it." The angel replies, "You can't be here. You chose this." Dejected, he goes into the other door. The angel there blocks him and asks him why he was here. He replies, "I had no choice." Okay, that died 1,000 fucking deaths in a minute. Okay.
See that you made up for it with that. You have another joke?
I do.
Ugh.
Granted, okay. Granted, that one requires a lot of thought, some debate, and will probably result in some hate emails. But I've got another one. The old backup O'Rooney joke. You ready?
I'm ready.
So a guy is talking with a friend of his in the supermarket. He tells the friend, "My wife went to the West Indies without me." The friend asks, "Jamaica?" The guy responds, No, she did it of her own free will." Greetings, fellow existential adventurers. We find ourselves waist deep in the crap storm today. Mikey, I hope you packed your poop-proof Mikey, I hope you packed your poop-proof hip waders and a sense of humor. You'll need both for this wild ride. Welcome to episode 34 of Mr. Robin's Hood Podcast, where we'll be diving into the existential question of free will or lack thereof. I am your intrepid host, Robin Hohweiler, a.k.a. Mr. Robin, and joining me as always is my trusty companion, relentless collaborator, and all-around BFF, best fiend forever, none other than Mikel Mauree Robinson, a.k.a. Mikey on the mic, to our devoted listeners, and also affectionately known as Roadkill Rhonda, for her knack for mowing down small critters on her infamous road trips. She's even on a watch list with the ASPCA and PETA now. Say hello to our free-willing audience, Mikey.
All because I told him I killed a bunny. I ran over a bunny on the way home. From Christmas, of all things. Anyhow, well, hello. That was quite the introduction.
Free-willing audience?
Yes.
Yeah.
I used to love to watch Free Willy. Just that reminded me of that. Just had to throw that in there. Orcas are my favorite animal. So, never ran over an orca, though.
That would be hard to do.
Probably would. Be wild.
Okay. So we're kind of getting into some deep stuff here.
Yes,
Mickey.
it's
We
very
don't
deep.
normally do this. And I don't know whose freaking idea this was.
Well, I feel like it was your idea, and
Of
then
course it
I
was.
just blindly supported it until I realized that this is a thinking one. Not that I don't enjoy thinking, but this one challenged me in my thoughts about things.
Well, it's
You know?
really it's a little confusing. And what inspired this was I had read an article and I shared it with Mikey. And the article, the title of it was "There Is No Free Will." And for those of you who may not know or fully understand free will, because I think it's something that most people take for granted, but the Google definition is the power of acting without the constraint or necessity or fate, the ability to act at one's own discretion. So we'll just establish that. And the article was based on a book that had been written by a professor of neuroscience and neurobiology at Stanford University by the name of Robert Sapolsky. And we did, in fairness, try to get Dr. Sapolsky to come on and do this podcast. And I made a very sincere and polite request via email. And I got a polite, although somewhat condescending email back from his publicist saying that the good doctor really doesn't have time for people of our ilkage. So that was that. And
so now we're here alone.
We're here alone.
But we're still going to talk about this because it was still intriguing to us.
Right. And the name of the book, by the way, is Determined, A Science of Life Without Free Will. And it was published in October of 2023. It's available on Amazon if you want to go on there and do like I did and buy the book. I haven't read it.
I know, I was going to say, and not read it. But this book's massive. I'm thinking, like, no wonder he doesn't have time if he's writing books like this. Damn.
Yeah, there's like 600 pages in there.
He was determined.
Yeah, no doubt.
To convince us all there's no free will, which I'll already put my stance on it. There definitely is.
Well, and when we started talking about doing this podcast, gosh, I think it was back in August or September, and we kind of trotted out the concept to at least one person that I remember for sure, our friend Bob Ray. And he looked at us.
I can hear him listening to this.
He looked at us like we were out of our freaking mind.
As he usually does.
He says,
but he keeps coming back to hear all the nonsense.
Back, yeah, and he even shows up when we're doing podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But anyhow, what was his take on it?
That there absolutely is free will.
Yeah,
and that it just doesn't make sense to
say there's not
otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in fairness, because we are kind of picking on Dr. Sapolsky, I'm going to at least read the opening to a article that was published in the New York Times about.
See, he's being published in the New York Times.
Yeah,
in no time for us peasants.
No, of course not. And he's got a freaking publicist.
I know.
Don't I need a publicist?
Yeah,
we need. That's what we need. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to read this introduction. This was published in the New York Times back in October 2023. And the name of the article, you can look it up if you have a New York Times subscription online, because they don't let you look. If you're bougie like
that, like my grandpa Fred.
Oh, there you go.
He's had that subscription forever.
Well, so have I, but it's just because I'm too lazy to cancel it.
Well, he sent me some magazine, and it's a pretty good one.
Oh, okay.
I have to admit, I don't blame you. I'm definitely not condoning you for that.
So the name of this article was A Conversation with Robert Sapolsky, Who Doesn't Believe in Free Will.
That's the title.
Yeah. Then in parentheses after it says, but feel free to disagree.
That's funny. Well, it's just such a straight to the point. This is an interview or talk with, what did you say?
And what they did was they actually, it was a kind of a compilation.
They asked him question and then
Of
response?
interviews that he had already done.
Oh.
And they just kind of pulled it all into the New York Times and published
an article.
So it starts off with shedding the concept, completely strikes, and what he's saying there is shedding the concept of free will completely strikes at our sense of identity and autonomy. The Stanford biologist and neuroscientist argues it might also be liberating. There is no free will, according to Robert Sapolsky, a biologist and neuroscientist at Stanford University and a recipient of the MacArthur Foundation Genius Grant. Dr. Sapolsky worked for decades as a field primatologist before turning to neuroscience, and he has spent his career investigating behavior across the animal kingdom and writing about it in books including Behave, The Biology of Humans at Our Best and Worst, and Monkey Love, and other essays on our lives as animals. In his latest book, Determined, A Science of Life Without Free Will, Dr. Sapolsky confronts and refutes the biological and philosophical arguments of free will. He contends that we are not free agents, but that biology, hormones, childhood, and life circumstances coalesce to produce actions that we merely feel were ours to choose. It's a provocative claim, he concedes, but he would be content if readers simply began to question the belief, which is embedded in our cultural conversation. Getting rid of free will completely strikes at our sense of identity and autonomy and where we get meaning from, Dr. Sapolsky said, and this makes the idea particularly hard to shake. There are major implications, he notes. Absent free will, no one should be held responsible for their behavior, good or bad. Dr. Sapolsky sees this as liberating for most people for whom life has been about being blamed and punished and deprived and ignored for things they have no control over. So that's kind of the opening to that particular article.
So basically he's saying that even though you think you're choosing things, you think that you have free will, you really don't. But what's the scientific backing to that?
Well, and
what is he studying? I mean, obviously it's neuroscience of the brain, but what in the brain is he studying to prove that?
Well,
I have so many questions,
Yeah, and we'll kind of get into that here in a second. I just want to point out that when I started kind of digging into this, it was maddening. You have two camps here. You have the science camp that says there's probably no free will.
Is there a camp in between these camps?
Interestingly, there is. And then there's also this philosophical camp.
Yeah, with Aristotle.
That says that there absolutely is free will. And somewhere in between is kind of, maybe it's life as we know it, but it's really kind of confusing to me.
Same. Because I feel like I'm in an in-between camp, as I feel that there are things in our biological makeup that lead to the decisions that we make and whatever. But at the end of it, there's still the free will to make that decision.
Yeah.
No,
you're absolutely. I think you're absolutely dead on, and that was what was just so confusing or maddening about the more you got into this, because the two sides contradict one another constantly, and it kind of reminded me. You could every instance that, or for every example that the science side throws out, you can come up with a counter.
Yeah,
for that.
A rebuttal.
And exactly. And the same for on the philosophical side.
Right.
You could do exactly the same thing. And it becomes kind of a never ending, here's an idea. And the thing that occurred to me was, I got a dog trying to uproot a chair over here. the thing that occurred to me.
He is choosing that by his own free will.
Yeah, to bug me. Yeah. There is an old idiom, I guess, from the 70s stoners used to throw out. And you could come up with all kinds of freaking answers, and there was no right answer.
Right.
I think that was the thing. And that was, so if you pitch a tent on the side of a hill or out in a field, doesn't matter where, and you take that tent down, roll it up, move it down 50 yards, and set the tent up again, what happened to the space that was inside the tent?
The space that was inside the tent?
Yeah.
Well, you gave the space back to its rightful owner, the sky. I mean, and then you just closed it up and asked to use a new space.
Yeah, no, there's no right answer. I mean, you could.
That's my answer to that.
We could throw.
That sounds wild, doesn't it?
We could go around this table, and I'm sure everybody has a different answer. And that's kind of where I felt I was with this as I got deeper into it. And then I came across a video transcript that I found online that kind of plays both camps and then ends it by trying to find something in the middle. And although I'm reluctant to read this in its entirety, it's actually pretty good, and it brings this whole concept, I think, down to more of a layman's level.
Right, yeah.
So, with your indulgence, podcast audience, we're going to read this.
All right. Get it.
This, by the way, came from a video called The Illusion of Free Will. It was posted on YouTube by a content provider named Aperture, and he has a website at brilliant.org/aperture. Okay, here's an apple and here's a banana. Pick one. Whichever you picked, it is your decision completely. This is what we call free will. It's the idea that we are the sole authors of our destiny, that in the face of multiple choices, whatever decision we make is completely down to us. We have the power of free choice. But what if I told you that free will is a myth and that we are all just a group of atoms that will react to a particular stimulus in a way that can be predetermined if you picked a banana at the beginning and would go back in time? If free will truly exists, you should be able to change your mind and pick the apple instead. What if I told you that if we go back in time under the exact same circumstances, you'll pick the banana again? What if I told you that I can actually tell you which of these two options you're going to pick 300 milliseconds before you actually pick it with 100% accuracy? In the 1980s, a psychologist used an EEG, that's an electroencephalogram, to show that you could read and tell that someone is about to move 300 milliseconds before they decide in their conscious mind to actually move. This means that before we decide that we want to move our bodies, it's already been decided for us in our subconscious, and we only think that we have made the decision ourselves after it's already been done. In a similar study, participants were asked to press one of the two buttons that were while looking at a clock with random sequence of letters on a screen with the use of fMRI, also known as functional magnetic resonance imaging. They discovered that two of the participants' brain regions showed what button they would press 7 to 10 seconds before they consciously made that decision. The results of this research proves only one thing. A few seconds before you pick the banana or the apple, your brain makes that decision for you. It is after this decision has been made, deep in your subconscious, that your brain becomes aware of it and we become convinced that we were in the process of making that decision.
So it's saying that the subconscious is so there's two people in you, your subconscious and then your conscious?
Apparently. Because the brain is like the heart, we don't tell it what to do. It just does. So in reality, consciously making a decision, the experience we call free will, is actually an illusion. It's simply a visualization of events that the brain has already set in motion. It tells you what the brain has decided to do. For as long as society has existed, we've understood the role of surrounding influences on our decision-making, with idioms like, it takes a village to raise a child, and you are the product of your environment. We understand that to a great extent, our upbringing, our parents, the society we grew up in, all of these inform our decision-making processes. If someone is born religious, it's not crazy to think that they'll be religious throughout their lives. Taking it a step further, things like genetics also play a huge role in our choices. Charles Darwin and the theory of evolution brought forward the idea that if species do indeed evolve, then things like intelligence must be hereditary. Intelligence is a trait that helps us make better decisions, and while you can study hard to know more than the average person, for the most part, how intelligent you are is not entirely up to you. So some people cannot make certain intelligent choices because they don't want to, but because their genes are limited in that instance. Would you say that the person has the freedom to make those intelligent choices? Because in reality, they do not.
Yeah, you're getting into the weeds now, you know?
Yeah?
That's a weed. There's so many weeds there because I feel like, intelligence can be genetically passed down, I mean, I feel like that is proven, but I mean, you're talking about there's so many different choices. So we're going to consider your intelligence a choice because you're not smart enough to make the right choice? Means you don't have the free will to make the choice that you're making at your own capacity. You know what I'm saying?
I think what this guy is saying is...
Well, I feel like I know what he's saying, but you get what I'm saying,
yeah,
right?
I do. And I'm going to skip just a little bit here. It occurred to me when we started this that the people that are listening to this, it was free will that caused them to come in and select this podcast to listen to.
Right. They made the choice.
But on the other hand, perhaps we're playing to their predetermined quirks and whatnot that makes them listen to this podcast. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I said there should be a camp in the middle.
There you go.
There's a middle camp.
That's where I think we're headed here. So
to the middle camp we go.
So some scientists who still want to cling to the idea of free will argue that while it's true that the subconscious makes decisions for the conscious, we still have the free will to shape the unconscious world, and on first glance, this makes a lot of sense. You can read a book, and an idea gets into your subconscious. Then, in the face of a choice, the idea you read floats back out of your subconscious, forming your conscious decision. However, there's a flaw. It's much like a paradox, because where then does the desire to change your subconscious by reading a book come from? Desire, much like choice, comes from the subconscious. So a conscious effort to shape your subconscious is actually a subconscious effort to change your subconscious.
Yeah, and that's why you meditate and do all those things.
Okay.
Because you can tap into your subconscious. I mean, there's so much here. I feel like it's so hard to, I don't know. That's why I'm saying the middle camp thing. And even at the middle camp, there's like little tiny other camps, but there's still the middle camp.
Yeah.
Because there's pieces of this that I feel like other people may disagree with, but agree. versus
Yeah.
what?
Well, and I think this guy finally gets to that, and I'll get there, I promise, in just a little bit. The biggest obstacle to the idea of free will, or lack thereof, faces is morality. If morality is based on free will, and free will doesn't exist, then what happens to morality? What happens to every other man-made institution that has been designed around the idea of free will when faced with questions like these? Many people immediately fall into a trap of fatalism. Fatalism is the idea that we are completely powerless in the universe's game. People who think like this believe that since we are not completely in charge of our destiny, we're completely at its mercy, that it's random and not up to us when they become a lot less happy and start slacking in their relationships. They stop trying to be good people or uphold any moral standards, and overall, they start to have a lower sense of fulfillment in life. But we don't have to fall into that trap. The scientists who champion the idea of the absence of free will would rather explain it philosophically as determinism rather than fatalism. Determinism is the idea that all events are predetermined, Determinism is the idea that all events are predetermined. The existing causes that everything will happen can be explained through the clockwork laws of cause and effect.
So basically, this is like reverse psychology, where they're saying if you're determined, it'll be good, and if you're if you're a fatalist, then you're just going to keep going down, which would be also proving the other side in a sense, because you're still choosing to accept that, your fate is what you're supposed to do.
Where I think this is heading is that I think that to some degree, and I think this is what you were talking about, that you have to find the camp in the middle.
Right.
Because the determinants
it's complicating. I feel like there are so many moving parts to this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many books about how, to tap into your subconscious. So, I mean, if you can do that, then it's different than if you can't. If you can't recognize that you're, making those decisions.
Mm-hmm. Even the scientists who have been studying this for decades have found it very disturbing. It's a difficult thing to wrap your head around. Yeah, no shit.
Right.
Because it goes against everything society is built around. Free will is the basis of our society. It's what determines who is right and who is wrong, who gets the praise and who deserves to be punished. It tells us that a person who killed another person deserves to spend the rest of their life in prison, and that someone who works hard deserves a good life. Therein lies the fear of spreading the absence of free will message. Many scientists believe that if enough people are aware of this idea, it could literally end society as we know it, because why would someone else risk their life to save another person if, after he's done it, people will only say, well, he didn't decide to do that himself, so he doesn't deserve any praise. The reality is praise and punishment are two huge factors that help influence our decisions. So, if we remove them from our society, we pave the way for fewer good deeds and much worse ones. It's a strange dilemma to be in, because although the truth may be that we do not have free will, believing that we do is actually a lot better for us. This is the concept of illusionism, that although free will is an illusion, it's one that we must keep up with, because Faced with the choice between truth and good, it benefits the majority of humanity to always choose good. So he was kind of, he was a little more in the science camp, I think, really, than the philosophy.
Well, yeah, because basically he's just saying, we just need to believe that because that's what's better for us. I'm like, did your subconscious tell you that? And 300 milliseconds later, it got typed out in your little post or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's a very complicated thought, I think, to think about free will as in what it is versus free will in the sense that science is trying to disapprove that that's a real thing. But I mean, we are still, I feel like we're still animals in a sense where we do have instincts and stuff, but and I do think that the subconscious plays into it, but I also feel like we're more aware of our subconscious, that we can differentiate between the two.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but like what my brain says that it should do and what I decide to do a lot of times is two different things.
So the interviewer with Robert Sapolsky, and this was in the New York Times interview with him, really was trying to goad him, I think, into a response. And the question they asked was, so whether I wore a red or blue shirt today, are you saying I didn't really choose that? And Sapolsky responded, absolutely. It can play out in the seconds before. Studies show that if you're sitting in a room with a terrible smell, people become more socially conservative. Some of that has to do with genetics. What's the makeup of their olfactory receptors? With childhood, what conditioning did they have to particular smells? All of that affects the outcome. And then the interviewer went on, he said, well, what about something bigger, like choosing where you go to college? Sapolsky responded, you ask, why did you pick this one? And the person says, I've learned that I do better in smaller classes, or they have an amazing party scene. At any meaningful juncture, we're making decisions based on our tastes and predilections and values and characters. And you have to ask, where did they come from? Neuroscience is getting really good at two levels of stuff. One is understanding what a particular part of the brain does based on techniques like neuroimaging and transcranial magnetic stimulation. I don't know. I mean, I could sit here and read this stuff all afternoon, and it still comes down to the same thing. It's just there's no absolute answer.
No, there isn't. But in my free will, I choose to believe in free will at the end of it all.
And come on and do another podcast.
Yes. Well, and I'm just thinking like, did my subconscious choose this 300 milliseconds before? I mean, and I understand where, I feel like science can prove a lot of things, but just because science proves that you choose to do something 300 milliseconds before you do it doesn't mean you still didn't have a hand in that choice too. At the end of it.
Okay.
What would you call me? I don't even know.
A middle of the road.
A realist.
Oh no, maybe that's it.
Just like the reality of it, I guess, in the broader scheme.
And I'm just trying to figure out if society as we know it or understand it, and life as we're living right now in this space, if that's all just, maybe it's kind of the middle ground here. There's a certain amount of free will involved. There is certainly human biology and neuroscience and whatever, the predetermined over here. And maybe life as we know it and understand it, whether we appreciate that or not, is kind of a mix of the two.
Yeah, I could see that because I see, I mean, I'm going to pull in deja vu because the way that I see deja vu is it means that you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing in that moment. And in that thought, then predetermination would kind of fit.
Yes. Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm recognizing that and I'm choosing to continue following
Free will.
the free will to do that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just,
And
it's so sticky.
That's the thing about this, because it's like you can argue yourself out of either answer.
Sure.
And
you could just go round and round. It's like the song that never ends.
Oh, okay.
And it goes on.
And one of our in-studio audience members asked, what about karma?
Oh, that's a good one.
Marianne.
What about karma? Because what you're putting out into the universe will come back
and slap the shit out of you.
Slap you so hard. Karma's beat the shit out of me, man. I mean,
yeah.
I think about her a lot. I'm like, what would karma do? Because I know what she's capable of.
No, and that's actually a really good point.
It is.
Yeah. So looking at it from that standpoint, I guess whatever you do,
whatever you decide to do in your own free will,
your free will is going to come back and slap the shit out of you.
Yeah, one way or the other.
But
I mean, whether it's a good slap forward or like a slap you back down.
So do you think karma then resides in our subconscious?
It's possible. She's saying no.
She's saying no.
So karma's just coming for you. She's out there like Mother Nature and shit, like hunting us down, like the wind out there today. Damn.
Yeah. So we could probably do a whole nother podcast on
karma. We probably could. Yeah.
Because Lord knows I've got mountains of it behind me. I'm still trying to tunnel through.
Yeah.
I think we all do.
It comes in droves. Yeah. Right. Well, I think that's just part of being human, because nobody's perfect, and karma lets you know you're not. She reminds you.
So we've kind of struggled through this, admittedly.
Well, you say that, but I feel like it was, a good conversation about a topic that is very
sticky.
It's very deep, and
there's no one side to it.
No,
and I think
there's
you have
not.
to look at all sides. And I hope that Mauree will appreciate this.
I think he will. I would love to hear his stance on free will.
Oh, we're going
to hear it. So I can't wait for that. We'll report back on what Mauree.
Mauree.
I don't do it as good as you. But no, we didn't sit here and like super prepare for this. So this was really organic. It's like just a conversation of the minds meeting over how we feel about free will and what this Sapolsky fella said in his writings and musings. And, I hope free will is something that you can think about now. I don't know. I don't know that many people have really thought about that. I feel like we're bringing a new idea out there, just not only to ourselves, but to other people. Because, we got phones and all this other stuff. Nobody sits down and just talks about random stuff. Like, what really is free will,
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like this is really playing to my, self-proclaimed philosophical self. That's not the right word. My philosophical self, being a self-proclaimed philosopher myself. So this was fun for me. So thank you. Thank you for bringing this to the table. And I hope you guys enjoyed listening to us banter about something so complicated. We're still not sure that we're wrapping our head around it, but.
No. And we'd certainly, Dr. Sapolsky, if you happen to hear this, and fired your publicist and come on the podcast.
Wouldn't that be great if he was sitting in his office listening to this and he was like, I really missed the boat on this one.
Or Where do these two morons come off?
Yeah, where do these freaks live? Oh, yeah, Oklahoma.
Oh, never mind.
Never mind, I get it now. No. Anyhow.
Okay, well, we'll wrap this up. If you have any questions for either Mikey or myself about today's episode or any other darn thing, you can email us at mr.robin@mrrobinshood.com or mikey@mrrobinshood.com. Also, you can find us on Facebook at Mr. Robin's Hood Podcast. As always, you can also reach out to Mikey or me via Podophone at 580-2...
That's not right.
No, 580-827-0472. Maybe you just want to get something off your chest, or you're feeling some butt pain because
Or
of
you
something,
want to disprove free will.
because of something we said during the podcast, give us a call. Unless, of course, you're a Calvinist. You can leave a voicemail. Text us if you have a question, concern, complaint, compliment, suggestion, whatever. Just don't be a dick about it. In the meantime, tell all your friends to listen to this podcast as though their lives depend upon it. As always, you can stream or download episodes of Mr. Robin's Hood Podcast wherever you usually find that sort of nonsense. We're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, the Podbean app, Apple Podcasts, Player FM, Listen Notes, and the Podchaser. You can also stream them directly from our Podbean website at mrrobinshoodpodcast.podbean.com.
Then we can track you better.
Yeah. And you can, whatever streaming or downloading you do of our podcasts, it's for free because we're idiots. So we'll close now.
And we believe in free will.
We believe in free will, baby. So bring it. So we'll close now by reminding everyone, as we always do, to stay hungry, stay foolish,
and most importantly, stay weird.
How's that for free will? Bye.
Bye.